Hello, Adrian Salbuchi once again. This is the third video, the third pillar for founding a second republic, which requires rejecting the debt-based economic system. In order for the financial system to wield enormous power all over the world, they need everybody to be indebted to the global banking overworld. And I mean everybody, individuals, families, companies, organizations, yes, government. And they need that indebtedness to go on for years and years and generations and generations. They do this through compound interest, ensuring that people become indebted and can never get out of debt again. And the same with companies and the same with states and in governments. Under a second republic, each country will need to tackle its problem with debt in a different manner. In the US, undoubtedly, it means auditing the Fed and revamping your entire financial system. In the case of Argentina, it's a very special case, and let me just sort of brief you in on some of the details. As many of you know, Argentina suffered various US-backed military coups in 1955, in 1961, in 1966, and the worst ever in 1976. This last military, which is really a civilian military takeover, took place in March 1976, but the economy was placed 100% under the control of civilians. Jose Alfredo Martinez de Oz, Domingo Cavallo, Guillermo Walter Klein, the Rome brothers, who were all great doing business with Chase Manhattan Bank, Citicorp, First Bank of Boston, HSBC, the Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank. They actually worked on both sides of the counter. They were, on the one hand, ministers of economy, secretaries of finance, central bank presidents and officers, and then on the other side, they were the legal counsel for those very same banks that we were becoming indebted to as a country. They were advisors to Citicorp and Banque Nationale de Paris and NatWest in Europe. In this way, the Argentine foreign debt, public debt, grew and grew and grew. From $6 billion in 1976 when the military took over to $36 billion when democracy was ushered in 1983 once again. And from then onwards, all the so-called democratic governments, Raúl Alfonsín, then Carlos Menem, then Fernando de la Rúa, then Eduardo Dualde, and now the notoriously criminal Kirchner duo, Nestor Kirchner and his wife Cristina Kirchner, have done nothing but to revamp the foreign debt and kick it forward, making it eternal. So it grew from 36 billion in 1983 to 45 billion with Menem to 76 billion, then to 100 billion, and now it's almost at 200 billion. It is unpayable, it is fraudulent, and it ensures that Argentina will always bite the dust. It has become Argentina's foremost problem, generating social hardship, unrest, poverty, sickness, and a generalized dumbing down of the entire population. And it has also become a litmus test for all so-called democratic governments. A president, no matter how bad he is, and believe me, we've had some of the worst in the world, can reach power as long as he takes up a commitment. He ensures the bankers that he will never, ever, ever investigate the foreign debt of the Republic of Argentina, which can all be traced back, or at least 70 or 80% of it, to the illegitimate and illegal military takeover of 1976. If they promise to do that, everything's just fine. Even though a federal court ruled in July 2000 that after 18 years of investigation, because a citizen by the name of Alejandro Olmos had the bravery and the courage to actually file a lawsuit and forced, of course, to investigate that. They threw it backwards and forwards and they procrastinated, but after 18 years, in the year 2000, the judge, Jorge Ballesteros, said that there was so much wrongdoing that even though a lot of time had gone by, he recommended that under Article 75 of the Argentine Constitution, Congress should investigate what that foreign debt was all about. Naturally, Congress never investigated anything because our senators and deputies, as happens in America, are there because of the money power. And the money power, they know, would dry up if they were to even insinuate that they're going to investigate the foreign debt. What should Argentina do in the specific case of our problem with debt? We should honor legitimate debts, because a part of our public debt is correct. We should investigate dubious debt, which is the bulk by around 70 to 80%, which can be traced back to the military regime that illegally usurped power in 1976. And we should repudiate and reject the illegitimate and illegal debt, which would require not only that the amounts that we have paid should be returned to Argentina by the banksters, but also that they should indemnify us for the moral damage and the material damage that they have caused. You see, the repudiated debt in Argentina and many other countries can be reclassified as what is called odious debt, which is a legal concept in international law that holds that a national debt incurred by a regime that was illegal and for purposes that do not serve the best interest, the common good of the nation, such as wars of aggression, should not be enforceable. Such debts are considered by this doctrine to be personal debts of the regime and not debts of the state. It also applies when a despotic regime contracts debts not for the needs and interests of the state, but in order to strengthen itself and to suppress popular insurrection. Well, that's what we had between 1976 and 1983. We had a regime that was violent, that made people disappear, that persecuted the public, and the lenders, the lending banks, knew about this very well. So they are also hostile to the Argentinian people, and we should not be paying them these debts. However, what have all so-called democratic governments done ever since? They have paid, continue to pay, and pay ever more, and the debt just grows and grows, and we do nothing about it. And we're talking about very common Wall Street Journal and Financial Times names. Manufacturers Hanover Trust, Chemical Bank, which later merged into JP Morgan Chase, Chase Manhattan Bank, Citicorp, Banque Nationale de Paris, Deutsche Bank, First Boston, Bank of America, Barclays, HSBC, National Westminster Bank, ABN, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, the IMF, the World Bank. They're all household names. You see, the concept of odious debt goes back to the beginning of the 20th century in cases that involve, for example, the repudiation of the debt that Cuba had with Spain by the United States after the Spanish-American War of 1898. You have cases going back to Poland in 1919, Costa Rica in 1923. But we have a very recent example, which is from 2004, when the George W. Bush government condoned, they declared about 85% of the debt of Iraq as odious debt. They did not call it that way, but that's what it was basically. They pardoned 85% of it. And they forced the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Russia, Spain, and Holland to follow them, which they did. And one of the French banks actually said, watch out. Other countries can do the same, because if we are pardoning 85% of Iraq's debt because it was contracted by a monster by the name of Saddam Hussein, well, other countries, Argentina for example, can turn around and say, well, why should we pay the debt that was incurred by General Videla or General Viola or General Galtieri? Those are also odious debts too. The debt trap is set up in such a way that only those politicians can become presidents of Argentina and ministers and governors and really have places of power if they promise, literally promise, that they will not investigate Argentina's debt because it can be repudiated and declared odious debt. And that applies to the administrations of Raúl Alfonsín, Carlos Menem, Fernando de la Rúa, Dualde, and the very criminal duo of the Kirchners who today have usurped power in Argentina. The debt trap, in a way, works that they make everybody think that the sole accountable party regarding Argentina's foreign debt is the Argentinian state, irrespective of who was in power when the debt was contracted. But in actual fact, if you look at it, there are 6 accountable parties. You have the Argentinian state, but then you have the successive governments, both military and civilian. Then you have the lending banks, the Goldman Sachses, the Bank of America, the JP Morgans, who knew that they were lending this money to a repressive authoritarian regime. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, as auditors as well as the World Bank. The rating organizations, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, Moody's, who kept saying, oh, everything's just fine with Argentina. Continue, let the money continue flowing. And the specialized media, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, the New York Times, who always said, it's just great, continue investing in Argentina. I'm not saying that the media should pay for the debt, but they should at least bear the political costs. Same with the rating agencies. And the lending banks should have a part of their responsibility, because until 2001, 2002, for example, they told investors to invest in Argentinian bonds because they were great. And they weren't. We went into default in 2001. So there is professional malpractice on the part of the banks. There are